Okay, and we're ready whenever you are.
Great. Thank you very much, Hannah. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second of the two planning committee meetings this week. I have to read out what I wrote out last night. In light of the government's most up-to-date guidance and rising COVID numbers, from town councillors agreed that this meeting should not meet physically, but be replaced by an informal meeting of the planning committee. The informal meeting of the planning committee will be held virtually. Virtual meetings cannot make formal decisions. Instead, the informal meeting will act as a consultative meeting, making recommendations on each of the applications put before them, and myself, as chair of the planning committee, in consultation with Jane, the planning manager, will be asked to decide on the applications in line with the committee's recommendation using our emergency delegation. This arrangement is in accordance with the council's standing orders. This means that the formal meeting of the planning committee is cancelled and replaced with this informal meeting of the planning committee. It was agreed this agenda would be split in two meetings due to the large number of applications on the agenda, and this is the second meeting. You can watch the recording of the first meeting held yesterday on the Frome Town Council's YouTube channel. For panellists on Zoom, please use the electric raise hand by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. For attendees on Zoom, please post questions to the Q&A board. Attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record as your question is answered. Tonight, Jane will clerk and Hannah will manage the questions board and the participant settings. The meeting will be recorded for minuting purposes and will also live stream to our YouTube channel. There you are. Thank you. So, without further ado, agenda item number 1, questions, comments and information from the public and councillors. Excellent, nothing there. Great. Agenda item number 2, please note that as this is an informal meeting, apologies from councillors will not be recorded. I think we're all here anyway, which is great. Agenda item number 3, any declaration of members' interests? Great, thank you. Agenda item number 4, to consider the plan applications for this part of the meeting. And over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Steve. Whilst I'm just introducing the applications, could we make Cecilia Hughes and Colin Danks panellists, please? Yes, so the first application on our list, number 755, is land south of the Mount Frome. And this is a full planning application for residential development, together with associated infrastructure, including landscaping, open space, drainage, and parking. And there is now a revised highway access and a revised master plan. The second application by the same applicants, number 756 on our list, is land at Little Keyford Lane to the Mount Blatch Bridge. And this is an outline planning application for residential development with associated parking, open space and infrastructure, with all matters reserved except access. So we have previously discussed these applications, and just as a reminder, I'll give you a very quick summary of what our objections were. It's also worth pointing out that at the time we'd included the third FR3 site, which was the Wainhomes site, and our objections were that we didn't feel that it was a comprehensive master plan. We didn't want to see the access onto Little Keyford Lane, that access and connectivity throughout all 3 sites were inadequate, that the impact of additional traffic locally rather than at Gore Hedge and the White Row Roundabout had not been given enough consideration. Footpath and cycleway connections should be agreed as part of the master plan, including for the outline application, to ensure they are implemented. Ideally, all applications should be full applications. And we need to ensure that all developments are future-proofed and at least meet the future home standards for 2025. And we did not support the connection to the gas grid. And lastly, we didn't feel that the proposed layout encouraged a sense of community, and that there are no local facilities that could be used by new residents and people that were already there in existing neighbourhoods. So that's a summary of our previous comments, and I believe Colin and or Cecilia are just going to give us a quick overview of the changes that have been made since we last made those comments. So over to Colin or Cecilia, whoever's going to do it. I don't know if you're saying anything, Colin, but we can't hear you. I can see you. I'm guessing Colin might have a problem with his internet connection.
Can you hear us, Colin? If you can you put a note in the chat or the Q&A? I think it's on our screens. Right.
I'll try sending Colin a message.
I love technology.
Yeah, I've just spoken to Colin. He's going to try and log out and log back in again. He can see everyone. It's a pity because he has prepared for today's meeting.
Okay, we'll give him a couple of minutes to see if he can
Yeah, if
bug out.
If there is a problem and he can't sort it out, we could always switch the applications around and do the Sandys Hill Lane one first and give Colin the opportunity to.
Yeah, do you think you could do that?
Yes.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Apologies.
No problem. Right. In which case then, I'll swap my papers around.
Yeah.
So in that case then we will also need Peter Roberts, Valentina and Simon, I believe. So this is application 757 on our list, and it's land north and south of Sandys Hill Lane, Frim. This is for the approval of reserved matters, so for layout, scale, appearance and landscaping, and that was relating to the Outline Planning Permission 2019/1671 for the development of 198 dwellings, parking, open space, landscaping and all associated infrastructure. And again, I'll just run you or give you a summary of what our objections were last time. So the relationship between the housing and the employment site is not demonstrated, and we need to ensure that the outlook of the houses are not compromised by the employment uses, and the potential noise impacts can be considered. We had some issues regarding the layout of the housing. We were disappointed with the design materials and the fact that they were just standard house types. We were concerned about the attenuation basins and the play areas with no surveillance, but the biggest concern was the level of the sustainability measures. So yeah, that's just a brief summary of what our previous objection was. So over to Peter, perhaps to just run us through what changes have been made since the application was submitted.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to try and share my screen now, see whether that works or not.
It works, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you and good evening. My name is Peter Roberts, and I'm the Senior Planning Manager at Curo. Just wanted to provide you with a bit of an update on our proposals at Sandys Hill Lane. I know that you have seen it before, so I'll try and keep this brief and just focus on the updates that we've made. So just before I get into the scheme, just a little reminder about Curo, so who we are. We're a West of England Housing Association house builder. We're based in Bath, and we own and manage around 13,000 affordable homes in and across the region, with about 25,000 customers. So we've got no shareholders. Any profits that we do make through our developments are ploughed straight back into the business, reinvested in our homes and communities. So that's improvement of existing homes, new delivery of new affordable housing stock, and support for the communities that live in our homes. A quick recap on the site. So the site straddles Sandys Hill Lane with access from Wessex Fields Retail Park to the west, just by Sainsbury's and McDonald's. Marston Trading Estate lies to the north, while Little Keyford Lane lies to the southeast. Our reserve matters proposals relate only to the residential components of the site, shown in red. The remainder of the site will be developed in due course by another developer, as allowed for through the Outline Planning Permission. So the Outline Planning Permission established a few things and was granted in March 2021. It established certain fixed parameters for the reserve matters. So primarily, it established the principle of development, that the residential development of this element of the site is acceptable. It granted consent for up to 235 dwellings, including 30% affordable housing. It allowed for the demolition of the Keyford farmhouse and outbuildings and granted consent for that. It approved in detail the access arrangements, and that's an approved issue. And then it established a requirement for a minimum of 1.52 hectares of bat replacement habitat and 1 hectare of public open space. So in terms of our reserve matters, so the original application was submitted in July 2021. The application, the key kind of elements of it, I guess, remain unchanged. So it's still for 198 new homes, including 30% affordable housing. It's still for a mix of 1 and 2 bed apartments and 2 and 4, or 2 to 4 bed, family homes. It's still a lower density development than permitted through the outline. So 37 fewer homes than permitted through that outline planning permission. You've just gone through reasons of concern that were expressed at the last meeting, so I won't reiterate those, but I'll come on to what we've done in response to those comments. And I think, you know, we've taken a number of months to come back with a revised scheme. Over that period, we've been working quite closely with officers. We've had significant feedback from the Civic Society, so we've really taken those comments on board as well. And they've influenced the revised proposals. So in terms of changes made, we've revised the elevations, we've revised the materials, we've provided additional information on levels, we've looked at the orientation of some plots around the northern basin in particular to improve overlooking, and we've enhanced the sustainability credentials of the scheme. So just in terms of the character or the changes that we've made to the architectural treatment of the scheme, we've really gone back to basics, if you like, and I think Civic Society had a lot to say in terms of the architectural design of the scheme as originally submitted. So we've gone back and looked again at the character of Frome, drawn out detailing, things like window surrounds, stone banding, courses, features such as dormer windows, canopies and entrances, and bay windows. We've looked again at the material palette, taking on board what others have said, and then the massing characteristics as well. And taking all of that on board, we've then re-looked at our proposals, and we've done a wholesale review of the houses that we've proposed and the apartments, in order to incorporate some of those features and reflect the local vernacular more directly. So we've introduced, and these are kind of working drawings, if you like, at this stage, just to show you the process that we've gone through. So we've introduced the banding along the centre of some of the properties horizontally, in order to reflect the banding seen on some of the older properties. A big criticism from the Civic Society was the prevalence of projecting front gables. So we've really reduced that feature, or removed it from the vast majority of properties. We've added in some painted render, again at the request of the Civic Society, and it increased the window sizes, and introduced stone or reconstituted stone window surrounds and bay windows to some feature properties. We've done a similar exercise for the apartments. So again, re-looked at the proportions of the fenestration in order to better reflect what's in Frome, introduced window surrounds, and introduced some reconstituted stone to reflect the forest marble that's seen in the local area. So the kind of key elements of the revised elevations: removal of most of the projecting gables, replacement dwellings have been designed with less focus on the roof form. So really, removing the focus of the roof on some of the house types. We've increased the proportions of the windows in order to increase the amount of light in the houses, and as said, we've reviewed the local vernacular and amended the designs to reflect that local detailing. And then in terms of the materials, so previously we had an element of red brick within the scheme, which in particular the Civic Society weren't happy with. So our walling palette has now been changed to remove that. So it now includes 2 buff bricks, reconstituted stone, and a kind of creamy render. We've also reduced the proportion of red tiles, and now propose a mix of grey and terracotta tiles. And just to kind of give an indication as to what that change looks like on a street scene, these are quite technical drawings, so they don't always give the best kind of view of the site, if you like, but you can see the difference in the house type designs, the larger windows, the less focus on the roof form, and tying in more with the local vernacular. In terms of the additional information that was sought, so there was a request to provide more sections in order to fully understand how the site is to be developed and how it relates to the existing landform. So we've provided additional sections. There's a couple from the suite that we've provided, but it really shows how we're respecting that existing landform and working with the contours rather than kind of completely remodeling the site, if you like. Just in terms of the layout, so the layout remains largely unchanged. There have been several changes where we've substituted plots, so gable fronted plots with non-gable fronted, and also around attenuation basin 3 in particular, we've reorientated some plots to improve the overlooking and outlook on that area. But all those areas now have improved overlooking. There's, I think, attenuation basin 2, which is kind of tucked behind the farmhouses, is difficult to provide kind of full overlooking of, because of the retention of the farmhouse included within our proposals. But there are several properties looking directly over that area. And then similar story to the south, really. There have been minor changes to the layout to incorporate the revised house types. But again, the basin and the leap is well overlooked by houses directly looking onto that. I'll just run through a few kind of images. So this is one of that southern section, basin and leap area, and the houses fronting that area. This is an image of the site frontage. So the southern parcel, and this is an image along the kind of main access road of the northern parcel. And an internal view of the site within the southern parcel again. So just to give you a flavour of what it'll look like. And finally, I know that the key concern really was in relation to sustainability. So as said, we've looked really hard at that in order to improve our offering. So our previous proposal included a 10% improvement against 2013 building regs. Our new proposal improves that significantly to a 41% improvement against 2013 building regs. So that's kind of 10% more than what will be required through 2021 building regulations. And I guess our preferred approach is to achieve that through air source heat pumps on all new homes across the development. We're also exploring opportunities of adding PV cells or panels on both the affordable and open market homes as a sales extra. But I guess that the issue that we have is the capacity of the local electricity network. So we have had conversations with SSE about whether they're able to provide sufficient capacity to enable us to deliver an entirely electric network or solution, so using air source heat pumps across the site. At the moment, we're not sure whether they will be able to. Those discussions are ongoing. So the commitment to the minimum of 41% improvement against 2013 building regulations also allows for a hybrid strategy to be delivered in the event that we can't be provided with sufficient capacity. So that solution would allow for gas boilers to be provided with solar PV panels on all homes within the first phase of development, and then air source heat pumps to be provided on all other homes as soon as we can get the capacity in order to deliver that. So that's the end of the presentation. So I guess I'll hand over for questions.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Questions? Any questions from anybody? I've got John first and then Paul.
I just have a question about the air source heat pumps and why there's a delay putting them in. That's the first part of the question. And And the kind of air source heat pumps that are envisaged, is it about a joint system with many houses connected together into one system or not? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. So the delay, if is essentially if SSE, who are the electricity providers, aren't able to allow us sufficient capacity, then we physically can't kind of plug them in, if you like. And in that scenario, we'll have to revert back to gas boilers with PV. If they can say, yeah, you can have the capacity, then you know that's the solution that we've kind of gone for, and that's what we deliver. But it's slightly out of our hands on that front. In terms of the actual units, we were looking at plot by plot provision.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Paul, over to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Peter, for your overview. Oh, I hope you can hear me all right. I just froze then. Hopefully I'll be all right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Just on the firstly, actually on the air source heat pumps, I think you mentioned that you're aiming to achieve 41% over 2013 building regs, primarily by installing heat pumps, which rings a bit of an alarm bell. Presumably, you don't just mean that you are going to improve the building envelope significantly as well. Would that be all right?
Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned. Yeah, in terms of the building fabric as well, we are enhancing building fabric.
Great. Okay. Yeah, and there's a few other things. I mean, firstly, this is certainly vastly improved on the previous application. I commend the kind of change in materials and the simplification of the design, etc. So that's great. It's a shame that we still haven't got a full master plan showing the industrial part of the site, because we don't know how this residential area is going to relate to the industrial site without seeing that. But I did notice on the site plan that at least most, if not all, the affordable housing is basically forming a buffer between the market housing and the industrial area, which is extremely worrying, really. I think that's a real shame, especially from a housing association, to put, if you like, the poor people, make the poor people provide a buffer from the industrial area. Is that intentional, or is that just something that's kind of slipped through unnoticed?
No, I mean, certainly it's not the intention to create a buffer, if you like, if that's the term. I mean, in terms of the outlook for those properties, that is something that we've considered in detail, and something which the Civic Society as well have asked for kind of for us to consider. So actually the kind of distances involved and the outlook for those properties, we feel that will actually be really good. So there's a distance of about 20 meters, including 7 meters worth of bat mitigation planting along that boundary between the two. So I think the distance between the facade of the homes proposed and the nearest employment building, and yeah, I mean, it would be great if we had the details of exactly what's going to go there. Unfortunately, that's out of our hands, but that distance is likely to be 30 meters there or thereabouts, or possibly more. So in terms of the kind of the outlook and the perception that it's looking directly onto employment buildings, and that it would be a kind of not a great outlook. I think that actually what's proposed is a suitable response.
I think that as you describe it, it probably seems reasonable, perhaps, but the reality is that we haven't got any kind of guarantee of what's going to be the other side of that red line, have we? So there could be, a significantly high, a high overbearing industrial building there, because we haven't got a clue what's going to go there. And it's great to have that kind of landscape buffer, etc. But if there is a really large industrial building, it's probably not going to be adequate. And of course, again, as I say, the people that suffer in that situation will be the people in the affordable housing, which seems a bit unfair to me, really. I mean, I can see why anyone would do that, because if you have a market housing there, it's going to reduce the value of it. But I would expect that from a mainstream developer. I wouldn't necessarily expect that from a housing association. Anyway, moving on. And on that note, the fact that you're a housing association, I wonder why you're only. It's great that you're going to meet policy 30% affordable housing, but as a housing association, it'd be great if you went beyond policy. This is a great opportunity for you to do that. And I imagine that with cross-subsidy, the amount of money that you'll make out of the market housing will easily pay for 30% and probably 40% of affordable housing. Presumably, you're looking to make additional profit from this scheme to fund affordable housing elsewhere in the country, in Somerset or wherever else you've got work. But it would be nice if for Frome, if your additional profit could be ploughed back into additional affordable housing on this site. Would that be possible?
So as said, all the profits that we make from development goes back into the delivery of affordable housing. Sometimes that's purchase of plots on site. Sometimes that's delivery of additional affordable housing, and sometimes it's ploughing it into improving the existing housing stock that we've got. In this instance, I think whilst there are lots of reports of developers making huge amounts of money, I think this development will probably can't afford to improve on the percentage of affordable housing that's been offered. At a later date, the business may take a decision to increase the amount of affordable housing within this scheme. But in terms of what's required of us at this stage, we're meeting policy requirements. We're meeting the terms of the Section 106, and we've got to have that flexibility to divert any profits that are made to the areas of the business that we think are kind of most in need at that time. So it's not a kind of categoric it won't ever happen, but as a business, I think we need the ability to direct that where it makes most difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great answer, and it's kind of what I would expect. And it's great, I commend you for aiming to meet policy. So many developers try and wiggle out of meeting policy, but as I'm sure you will understand that in Frome, Frome's become a very popular place, and house prices have gone up massively in recent years. So it's a great opportunity, even for housing associations, to make a good bit of money that they can use in their business elsewhere, as you said. And it would be nice, again, as I say, for Frome, if some of that profit could be put back into additional affordable housing on Frome sites. But again, we'll move on from that. I think the layout seems to be kind of improved. It's still a bit suburban, car-centric, like so many developments. But I just noticed that there doesn't seem to be a great permeability for pedestrians across the site, particularly on the particularly I noticed on the northern part of the site. There's no direct pedestrian route out to Little Keyford Lane, for example, which seems to be a no-brainer in a way to me. So if you're in that kind of extreme northeast part of the site and you want to walk somewhere, you've got quite a long walk to get out to Little Keyford Lane, to go to the co-op, say at Culverhill. Whereas you could have a direct access out of there.
It's not actually shown on this plan particularly clearly, but within the open space,
Right.
just south of Attenuation Basin 3, if you can see that,
Right.
essentially through the open space, there is a path proposed that provides accessibility there.
All right, and that'll be a kind of a non-muddy path, will it? It'll be an all year round footpath to get out to the.
Yeah.
Could you share that image? Could you share that image just so we can see what you're talking about? I can't find it.
I only have the master plan, which doesn't show that path to hand. At least I can pull it out and circulate it kind of after the meeting, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be useful. Yeah. If you could clarify that, because I mean, generally over the whole site, it would be great to have better permeability for pedestrians and cyclists. In fact, although cycling is perhaps less of an issue, but certainly for pedestrians. And I think the last thing I'll to give others a chance to speak is I think one of our points in our previous objections was that there's no real kind of community space, if you like. There's the attenuation basins, but they're potentially not that usable. There is the play area, but it would be nice again for a space where the community can meet or grow vegetables or that kind of activity. That's a bit lacking, as in so many planning applications.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the plans don't do us any favors in that respect. And I'm kicking myself because we've got we've worked quite hard on the attenuation basins to ensure that they're not kind of ditches that can't be used. So the gradients are really slack on those basins to encourage all round use, and the areas that will get wet are localized. So it will only be in the absolute extreme event that the water levels rise. So we really do envisage that that they will be usable the vast majority of the year, and provides for some meaningful meeting space. I guess the constraint that we have is well, the biodiversity issue of having to provide so much bat replacement habitat as well, and also keep dark corridors through the site. So that does dictate what we can do with the remainder of the site to some degree.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter.
Lizzie, sorry.
That's all right, thank you. Thank you, I'll put my hand down, there we go. Thank you, Peter, for the update and the revisions. First of all, thank you, I think, from me for listening to us last time. I think we beat you up a little bit last time. And actually, it's really nice to hear that was taken in the right spirit, and that you've engaged further with the community and particularly with the civic society, and that we're seeing meaningful change. A lot of times when we talk to people who come forward with planning proposals and applications, we have these conversations, and the thing that comes back looks exactly like the previous thing. You think, well, why did we? So it's really nice to see that you've engaged so much with people and brought forward changes that reflect what those people have said to you. A couple of things back to the sustainability side of things. You mentioned the increased network capacity required and SSE as a potential obstacle to that, which I understand. There's a chicken and egg thing going on though, in that if you put the PV panels on, that's going to reduce the demand for additional network capacity. But you don't want to put those on unless you don't get the additional network capacity, then you're going to put them on. So it seems like that you've got all the pieces of a jigsaw, but you're putting them in the wrong holes. So I do think I would challenge a little bit more to say, actually, you know, if you're going to do air source heat pumps, doing them in conjunction with PV panels makes an awful lot of sense. I was interested, there was a mention earlier about communal systems and whether any of the heat pump systems would be communal. I wondered if that might be an approach for the flats, at least, the blocks of apartments. I also wondered about why you chose an air source rather than, or not a mix with ground source heat pumps. I think, you know, the more we can do that would prevent the need for gas, the better, because otherwise you're rolling out gas infrastructure, which, you know, the gas networks are delighted to pay for rolling out gas network infrastructure, but that's going to be redundant at some point in the coming decades, within the lifetime of these homes. So yeah, I think those are probably my main things. I did wonder if, going back to Paul's comment about the industrial buildings and the height of industrial buildings compared to the residential buildings, if actually having the permissions for the residential buildings might then act as a constraint on what could go on the industrial site. I'm kind of looking at Jane for that one as to sort of whether that then would be a thing where we can control what comes next. So, but that's all from me for now.
Did you want me just to come back on the sustainability side of
Yes,
things?
please, Peter. Yeah.
Yes, I forgot to actually phrase it as a question. Sorry.
So no, we take your point on that. I mean, we have looked at air source heat pumps with PV as well as a solution. What I understand, I mean, I'm only a planner, so I'm not technical in that respect. But I understand that even with PV, we'd run into issues. As a housing association, we're very conscious of fuel poverty for our residents. Air source heat pumps are more expensive to run than gas boiler scenario, from what I understand. So we would be looking to pair air source heat pumps with PV for the affordable in any event, in order to counteract that. But also, yeah, we're looking to offer the PV as an addition to the air source heat pump. So it's something that we have taken into account in our discussions, but I don't think it's sufficient to get us over that barrier.
That's fair enough. And given, sorry, I'm jumping back in, given the amount of development that's proposed in this whole area around Frome, it is frustrating that ironically, the amount of power that SSE have over the whole process and the costs associated with that. So I don't know if there's maybe, Steve, anything that we / others can do to kind of, the joys of a master plan, to have that unified approach to going to the network operators and the underlying infrastructure providers to say, look, we need this, otherwise there's a whole series of things that can't happen or won't happen around town if they're given approval to go ahead. Anyway, enough.
I certainly think there's a question there to be asked, definitely, yeah. As you say, given the amount of development in that particular area, yeah, it seems crazy that we're being held back by stuff like that. Rich?
I think everybody's asked the questions I was going to ask, and every time I think, I've got one more, and people take it away. That's good. I'd just like to say thanks, Peter. I think it's a really good scheme now. I'm really pleased with the way that you've worked with the civic society and the way that you've taken on board things. So it's a much better scheme than many that I've seen over the last few years. So thank you for that. I've just got one sort of outstanding thing. Well, I was going to ask how could we influence SSE? Would it be worth us as a council, lobbying SSE and others, utility providers, and say, come on guys, get your act together. We need National Grid to work for us. Is there anything we could do on that? And the other thing is coming back to the commercial industrial site, which I appreciate is really nothing to do with you, I guess, but You know, who do we contact to say, come on, give us some idea of what's going to be there? Because it's really difficult to make a decision without that information. I'm familiar with large sites where it's all housing that you might do it in phases. I get that, but this is different. We've got something, you know, it could be retail, it could be heavy and light industry. We don't know, and we don't even know the outlines of the buildings, what they're going to look like. So it's not a criticism of your scheme, it's a criticism of the absence of the other half of the scheme, really. But you know, who do we get in touch with to do that? So SSE, how do we influence them? Would it help? And who do we talk to? DWH, presumably, for the commercial side.
So in terms of SSE, I mean, we've got consultants that are engaging with them in order to see what capacity we're able to get from them. They're applying pressure. You know, I guess it wouldn't harm for others to apply pressure too. But exactly how much weight that has, I don't know, I'm afraid. In terms of the industrial buildings, I mean, that land is in the ownership of well, I think is in the ownership of the original applicant, and so, you know, yeah, it may be that you want to contact them, but in terms of the scope of that permission, and the suggestion that it could be big industrial or dirty industry, the permission does only allow for B1 buildings as employment, so they are intrinsic and by definition compatible with residential uses. So I guess there's that assurance, if you like, that there won't be some big dirty polluting shed there. It will have to be a use which is compatible with residential, and therefore you know, things like noise and air quality of those adjacent buildings won't be detrimental to the residential amenity of future residents on this site.
Okay, yeah, I suppose a bit cynical there. So it's not, again, aimed at you. I've got this fear that, you know, all your houses get built, the rest of the site remains empty, and then a couple of years later, somebody turns around and says, well, we've tried to put employment land on here, but it's just not working. Nobody wants to go here. So here's a set of new plans for some more houses. And I kind of want to avoid that if we can, you know. I want to get some ideas down there. I'm cynical. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Jane, before I come to you, I'm just going to, there's a question from Helen Kay on the, oh, you were going to do it? Do you want me to do it, or do you want to do it?
I was going to say something else, but I was also, I think Hannah was probably going to point out that we've got a question from Helen and a comment from Martin as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether Helen wants to.
Well, I was going to read Helen's question out just to save a bit of time. So, Peter, it's a question from Helen Kay, who's a Mendip District Council.
Maybe I should read it.
Have been judged of low value and likely to be habitat for bats. Jane?
Do you think Steve was going to ask me to read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You, Jane? Sorry, internet went halfway. Yeah.
I'll read it. Okay, so on the map shown of the northern part of the site, it shows trees remaining along Keyford Lane, which currently runs to the farmhouse. But I saw a recent document that all these trees will be removed as they have been judged of low value and unlikely to be habitat for bats. But they currently add to the dark corridors for bats roosting in the farmhouse, and they contribute to the character area. Can you clarify if these trees are to stay or go?
Yeah, so there will be some tree removal in that area. Yeah, because they are poor quality. I can't remember the precise categories of the trees, but there are some that will need to be removed, but some will remain, and I believe that there's additional planting proposed in that area as well. Again, I'm afraid I haven't got the plan to hand to provide you precise details, but a bit of a mix on that one. Again, I can send through the specific plans that relate to that if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Yes. And whilst I'm here, just a comment from Martin Dimry. I think probably along the same lines as we've already said, which is that he's pleased to see the improvements to this following the Sewage parish meeting, and are Mendip able to offer support suggested for installing alternative to gas heating. So maybe there's a broader conversation between us and Mendip about approaching SSE, or maybe Mendip have got some other options that they can put forward. But yeah, I think we can certainly have those discussions. And lastly, I also had some comments from Duncan Skeen that he's asked us to read out at the meeting. So he's saying, he's referring to Natural England's comments, which echo the comments of Folk, which is Friends of Little Keyford, that with so many sites being considered for development in and around Little Keyford, their cumulative impact must be considered. He has given the reference number for your application to this one, but I think in some respects it also relates to the other two sites, but I'll read out what he's written anyway. So no improvement has been made in these revised plans regarding sole access to the site. Neil Young's objection showed clear photographic evidence of the near permanent McDonald's queues that will block or at least inconvenience vehicles accessing the site. I've also previously brought this to Mendip's attention, as I believe many others, though Somerset County Council highways seem unconcerned. As far as I can make out, the only terraced houses are affordable homes. This is potentially as socially divisive as having a poor door in a block of mostly swanky flats. The Civic Society has previously promoted wider use of terraced housing as a way of fitting in better with Froome's vernacular architecture. To preserve the rural character of Little Keyford Lane as much as possible, the landscape buffers indicated in the plans should be a condition of development, not at the whim of the developer. Additional usable community green space is needed to facilitate social interaction and build strong communities. Drainage basins do not qualify as usable space. And the project arboriculturist, Hillside Trees Limited, should be employed by the developer throughout the build process to monitor correct procedures are being observed with regard to the root protection zones, etc. And that was comments from Duncan Skeen, who is a member of Friends of Little Keyford. And sorry, just in response to Lizzie's question about the whether the fact if the housing is approved that will have any bearing on what can be built on the employment site. My view on that is that yes, I believe it should. I would look at it in the same way as when we were looking at an extension on Commerce Park. And obviously, there were noise impact assessments and everything that had to take into account the housing. So I would see that this would be dealt with in a similar way. And it may be the case, as is often with employment land, that until they actually have somebody who wants to build or buy a unit there, they won't actually know what the detail of those units is going to be at the moment. So yeah, I can see that it would be nice to see it. I can also see that it is difficult for anybody to perhaps say at this point in time. But yeah, I would hope and believe that with the housing approvals in place, that would then influence the heights and positioning of any employment units that would go on the adjoining site. Thank you. I'll shut up now.
Did you want me to come back on any of the that were raised in that?
Duncan,
I think in all
Steve's share.
have already been covered in previous questions. I guess that the one that hasn't been probably is the access point, and on that, I guess we're at reserve matters stage, so that the access, the location of the access was approved as part of the outline scheme. So it's not within our gift, even if we wanted to move the access point at this stage. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where we are on that. If you like, it's been approved and we can't change it.
Okay, I see, Paul, we've got your hand up.
Just another quick question, really, and actually it relates to access. It's not to do with vehicle access. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but just looking at the site plan again, the southern part of the site, if you're cycling, how do you get from the site to Culverhill, or is the only access on a bicycle from the southern part via the vehicle route?
There's a link to Little Keeford Lane at the eastern edge as well.
That looks like that goes down a steep bank, does it? By the way, it wiggles around.
Well, it does slope in that location. The kind of the wiggle, if you like, is in order to provide an accessible gradient. So yeah, I think that's an accessible route. And
that's a shared cycling and pedestrian route, is it?
Well, I think it's a 2 meter wide footpath in that location, but given kind of numbers of people likely to be using it, I mean it could be accessed by bike as well.
Right, so it wouldn't be,
I don't think it's
officially
not
a cycle route.
specifically to be a kind of a cycle route, but I think there's the ability to use it for access.
I mean, again, that does seem it's a bit kind of hit and miss, isn't it? As in the 21st century, when we're trying to encourage people to walk and cycle, not to have a good cycle route from the site is a bit of an oversight, I would think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean we can take that away. I will double check on the dimensions of that.
Okay.
And let you know if it is full 3 meters anyway. But
great, thanks.
Okay, any more questions? Any more comments? I think we're done. Jane, what have we got? Where are we so far? I think
where we are so far is, I think, to acknowledge and welcome the significant improvements that have been made, and also the community engagement that's taken place. Even though we've discussed it and appreciated how difficult it would be, I think it is still worth commenting that it would be helpful if we were able to see some indication of what was likely to go where on the industrial site, so that we could have more assurance about the impact that would have on the affordable housing. I wasn't quite sure whether or not Paul felt his concerns had been answered in response to that, with the distance being 20 metres with the 7 metres of planting. don't know whether Paul wants to.
That's kind of fine. I get the point, and I take Peter's explanation. I still would like to express a disappointment that the affordable housing is clustered along that edge, though.
Okay, so I'll add that in. And we would like to see more permeability for pedestrian and cycle routes, particularly with the exit onto Little Keyford Lane being suitable for cyclists as well. Also, we would still like to see some kind of community space. I appreciate what you've said about using the area around the attenuation basins, but maybe if that could actually be made more explicit in regards to how they might be utilised for community space, or whether that's, as Paul suggested, some kind of area for growing food, or even just a meeting area. And I think the comment from Lizzie about whether or not the flats could use communal air source pumps, and then just to go on to say that we would like to work with Mendip to try and influence SSE in terms of their capacity provision. And I've just seen a note come up on the chat from Elaine and Mike Pugsley, who also submitted some comments, which she would like us to convey. So before I do that, in terms of the response, obviously accepting that we might hear something from Elaine and Mike's comments, but was that a reasonable summary so far?
Yeah, I think Elaine and Mike's comments are for the next application, Jane.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. You're right. Sorry, I just saw it come up. Yeah, so completely ignore that.
But I do see that Hannah's got her hand up, so I'm not sure. Hannah, over to you.
Yep, we've got a question from Helen Kay. How or where will the construction traffic access the site? Will the access road via McDonald's be built out first, or will Little Keyford Lane be used?
No, so the site will be accessed from McDonald's. So that access road into the residential parcel will be built first, and so there's a condition attached to the outline planning permission, which is submission and approval of a construction and environmental management plan, and within that document we'll have to specify where the construction traffic will route, and that will show it accessing the site via Sandy Lane, the McDonald's access point.
Great, thank you, Peter. Thanks everybody. Peter, as I said at the start, because unfortunately this is an informal meeting process, because of the fact we're all virtual, we won't take a vote, but thanks very much for your I think everyone has said it's significant improvements from what we saw before. There's a lot to like about the development now. Jane will formulate our reply, and we'll get that off as soon as possible. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks for coming along tonight.
No, thank you for all your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Jane, over to you again. Still got your hand.
You were jumping around the screen, and I lost you there for a second.
Still here.
I'll put my hand down. Sorry. Okay. Yes. So yes, we've got Colin, and he appears to be moving this time.
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah. Does anybody want me to reiterate our previous objections and go through that again, or we're happy to go? I see some head shaking. Yeah. Okay. So in that case, then, Colin, over to you to just give us an overview of the changes that have been made.
Yeah, and thank you, Jane, and thank you, everyone. Apologies for earlier. I just seem to be kept getting kicked out. Right, what I'm going to do, I've got a few things to share with you. The things I'd just like to talk about is, as a recap, highway safety, gateway feature, walking and cycling, bus stops, sustainability and carbon, surface and foul drainage, green infrastructure, and character. So if you didn't make a note of that, that's all in the covering letter for the planning application. But I think they were the principal things that were raised previously. And I'm going to mix and match as we go through the information we've got. So I'm just going to hopefully share my screen. I'm going to show, and I'm hopeful. Can you see my screen coming up?
Yes, we can, Colin.
Right. What I'm now going to do is just put it on full page. Can you still see that?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Lovely. Right. Okay. So these are just some extracts from the master plan that we prepared, and hopefully it's probably the best way to explain this. So if you can see my pointer, we've obviously got the 3 sites here. This is our outline application, Little Keyford, and then our full application at Keyford. What this just shows is it gives an indication, obviously, of the proximity to the town centre and other services and facilities that are around. This is the co-op up here. I'll skip some pages because I think trying otherwise I'll be here all night with everybody. Right, let's just start with movement then. So we have looked at movement into the town, and we've got National Cycle Network here, Feltham Lane, as you know, and we've got Little Keyford Lane, and then we've got the Mount. For reasons which I'll come on to later, we are still of the view we shouldn't encourage use of the Mount, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail and technical detail, particularly in relation to this stretch here north of the site all the way up to where the co-op is. So what we're trying to do within the site is create east-west movement to what are essentially very good connections into Frome. We'd also like to see Little Keyford Lane become much more of a recreational route, and as part of that, you'll have seen from the application submitted, we intend for all 3 sites and have designed this in detail to access themselves from the Mount. But we'd like to see good connectivity for cycles and pedestrians. So there's 2 connections here, one for each of, this is the Wayne Home scheme. And this is our scheme, so a connection directly onto Little Keyford Lane. A connection across the Mount. A connection here, which as far as we can take it to the boundary, we can do. What we can't do is we're looking to others perhaps in the future to connect from the boundary to Feltham Lane, but that connection we can only facilitate to our boundary, which we have done. We obviously then got the connection up through Dragonfly close to Feltham Lane. We've also got walking connections north-south and connections here out onto the lane, affectionately known as the lane with no name. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a bit. But as you can see, our strategy has to be an east-west movement to connect into those 2, Feltham Lane and Little Keyford Lane. I'll pass some of this because I think we've been through this. If we just move on to the, so this is now into the bat habitat. What from our assessment and our reassessment, we've identified the areas where there is key bat habitat. And you can see that in the dark green here for all 3 of the sites. The total need for bat habitat in the local plan was 1.31 hectares. That amounts on our site, so what's previously known as 150A and 150, as 0.58 of a hectare and 0.02 of a hectare. That's right, yeah, 0.20 of a hectare, sorry. Our total provision is double on the double on this scheme. So it's 1.1 hectares, and it's 4 times on this site, which is 0.8 of a hectare. And you can see what we've tried to do. We've tried to create connected networks. I do note, as of today, there was a response from Natural England raising some questions, but I think that's because we've had a change of officer, and they perhaps haven't understood that this has been through a very long process of debate and discussion, and the amounts and how it was provided. So just to say there, the bat habitat has been a key part of these proposals. Then we went through a process of understanding the place, and I think we've talked about before, so we'll come on to this, is the gateway now. We've talked about having to establish a gateway into Frome, and there's lots of different ways to do that. I think in our previous discussions, we've talked about a roundabout being a gateway, or that's been a suggestion. We feel from an urban design perspective that a roundabout is very much a car-dominated approach to creating a gateway, and that will be the wrong thing to do here, when what we should be doing is, as is shown in these slides here, using our buildings to create pinch points, using our hedgerows and our change in surface treatments to the road, and our open spaces again to create those arrival points in a sense of a series of arrival points, which I'll come on to in a moment. So I'll just skip some of these. So where we arrived at was a broad master plan with development areas and then green infrastructure areas, all connected through. You have to bear with us, this is a master plan for all 3 sites. We've discussed it with Wayne Homes. They are amenable to the proposals and accessing their site off the mount, but of course that is their planning application, so we will be reliant on others to affect a change there were that appropriate, but we can prove that certainly the accesses work. So if I just skip some of these slides. In terms of density, the overall density, bearing in mind we're not trying to create suburbia here, we are trying to create something which is more akin to the town. We're at a density of 43 dwellings per hectare, which is a modest density appropriate to a town. It's not central town, but equally it's not suburban either. And that comes across in the design and structure of the houses, which is changed on the detailed aspect, which is this scheme. So just talking about the arrival points, apart from the traffic proposals, the road-based proposals, our arrival points really are in this area here. So there's an element of traffic calming, which we'll come on to, but it's also about having landmark buildings facing out. It's about having an opening of space into here. It's about having a pinch point across here. And then it's about continuing that strong built line, albeit slightly set back from the mount, but nevertheless, it's very clear you've transitioned from what is an open countryside here into a more urban setting here. We're also using linear park on the left-hand side as well. So you've got some setbacks, some softness to this. I'll talk a little bit more about the details of that in a moment. I won't go through the compliance checklist, but suffice to say, there's an explanation in the planning application. I'm just going to skip slides. And let me just, so in terms of surface water and drainage, this is probably a good slide to use. And the question we were asked is, are we comprehensive in our approach to dealing with surface water? Looking at sustainability as a key criteria, the best way to manage surface water is to try and use it in a dual way and use it to the benefit of ecology as well, which is what we have done here and here with our proposals. they're in these positions. So these are swales running through the site, which draw water down into these then attenuation basins. They're largely dry with obviously an increasing level of water in there in what's potentially a flood event. They're designed to the appropriate climate change levels. So from a storage point of view, they're the appropriate size for the level of development. They're also, and from an ecology point of view, they are very good for the bat population because they attract insects, and of course that's then good for bats and the foraging. So that's why they're positioned where they are. And if you notice on the previous slide, they're in the bat corridors that we're creating a bat habitat. In terms of connectivity, we have confirmed that this is the Wayne Home Scheme. The Wayne Home Scheme can will be able to attenuate their own proposals and also then connect into ours. So there's then a continual outfall. So actually, whilst these are separate ponds, they are all connected, and they'll be pipe connected, obviously under the mount. So there is a comprehensiveness to them. It's also important that there are a series of ponds when we look at the new Sewage for Adoption 8, which is all about sustainability. It's all about learning from lessons of the past. It's not to have a single pond on its own, but to have multiple ponds or multiple different options for surface water drainage. So hopefully that explains how we've been comprehensive in that regard. Right, I'm just going to stop sharing this document a moment, and then I'm just going to share another screen now. So if I just move on to the detailed design, and I'll come back to the mount as a completely separate exercise, if that's okay. So what have we done in terms of responding to civic society and yourselves and the comments raised? There's an introduction of terracing through parts of the site. Not all of the site, because again, you'd like to try and get a mixture of dwellings within a site, and that's appropriate to different needs of different groups of people. So we've got semi-detached dwellings here, but you see that the terracing is focused quite principally along the mount, and again it's about creating that sense of gateway arrival. We've also talked about the cycle link. So there's a cycle, and I heard in the last discussion, this is a combined cycle pedestrian link, but it's a wide link through here. We are using our estate roads in part because they should be calm. They're designed for low speeds. We shouldn't be entirely segregating the cyclist. I firmly believe that in appropriate locations you can have cyclists on roads, and likewise affecting the link. So it's designed in. What we can't do is we don't have the control of future land going off to Feltham Lane. Likewise, we have footpath link running down into here and then continuing into the countryside. And then we have a series of footpaths running around within the site. Let me just move on to materials. I'll find my materials plan. Here we go. In the last discussion, we talked about materials. You can see here, so we've got three principal types of materials. The vast majority of the site is a reconstituted stone, and it's reconstituted because there is a large propensity at the moment for natural stone to fail, and reconstituted stone is much more resilient. So, and the quality of reconstituted stone now is very high. So the vast majority of buildings are reconstituted stone. We have some render in some key locations. And then we've called it a brown brick. It's rather than being specific on the colour, we'd expect that to be a planning condition to agree that. but it would be again a brick which is appropriate to Frome as opposed to what's happened at Dragonfly Close. So hopefully that explains the materials side of things. I'll come back to the remainder of sustainability at the very end of this, but if I can just talk, if I can just finish on character, there is a simplicity now in the design of the buildings. We have retained Frumiers, and we, as I say, we've also looked at the terracing as well. So hopefully that's moved a good step further forward. I'm going to now just go back to, and I'm going to try and share another screen here. Bear with me. What I'd just like to do is talk about, so we've talked about this connection here, which is a footpath connection, which goes up past the back of the school. And hopefully, could I just ask somebody, could somebody say yes, they can see this okay?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can.
Wonderful. Right. So what we've done is we asked Stantec to do a full technical assessment of the B0392 from approximately here all the way up to the co-op. And if I can just go through the issues we found, which is an explanation of what the tack that we've taken. So there's a stile here, public right of way up to this point, and it drops you out onto the B3092, the mount. No footpaths. The issues we have at this point here is, I say, no footpaths, private ownership immediately on the boundary here. This over here, so if I just move up a little bit, this is in private ownership. We've got, again, albeit people I believe do use that, we've also got then residents, dwelling house here and garden. As we move up through here, we have this wall has been increased in height. We have a driveway here, and a driveway here. As we move further up, these have been updated since I last been on. There are usually 2 or 3 cars parked in here. As you can see, if you're at this point here, you can't, this wall comes out quite a long way. And I'll come back to the solutions we looked at. Again, you've got an obstacle here, which again is private ownership, parking, another access. Buildings hard against the carriageway on this side. You've got another building which juts out right to the carriageway on this side, and then you've got obviously a road access, but that's a relatively small road access. It says no entry. It says it's a dead end, but it actually does continue through, and then there's a couple of properties served off it. And then we get to Footway. If I just keep going a moment and look back now, and obviously there's into the co-op. What we would have to do, because of the ownerships, because of the walls, we would have to create a one-way system from approximately where this car is parked here, all the way down past here to approximately somewhere about here. The total length of that one way is, I think it's between 80 odd and 90 odd meters, depending on what option you might choose. So you'd have to have a shuttle system where you closed one full carriageway running all the way through there. That is one solution, but there are problems still with that solution which we can't solve. And we debated long and hard whether it would be still appropriate to pursue that. So you're putting pedestrians out onto here. Imagine if you had a refuse on this side of the B3092. So that is effectively a build out. Hopefully this is keeping up. a build out which runs all the way up to this car here. The issue we have with that build out is the conflicts with the existing residents. So if you've got a pedestrian walking up the B3092, at this point they would be on a pedestrian refuse here. They can't see anybody coming in and out of that drive. You've then got cars here which will need to still be given the opportunity to park here. So again, you've got conflict with cars crossing. We can't push people in this direction because it's privately owned, and we can't affect a change on that private ownership. Others might be able to, you as a town council might be able to negotiate a purchase of that driveway. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. You've then got the issue of, sorry, we moved a bit too far. You've then got issues of accesses here, and again, conflict. So our concern is sight lines, even though you might have a pavement then along here, a pedestrian refuse, sight lines from these private drives, cars crossing, and then you get onto the traffic. What happens with the traffic? Sorry, I've gone a little bit too far there. Want to turn this round. We've got traffic lights here at the moment, so that's one set of traffic lights, and you're starting to get a number of cars. I'm not sure whether they're parked or waiting for traffic. I think they're parked. There was a previous photograph up here and there was quite a queue of cars. The issue you have is if you're parking a car here as a driver, rightly or wrongly, you've got a 90 odd meter run, which you have to try and judge a car back here turning onto this or being on this carriageway and waiting for the ability to run that 96 meters with no ability to move on to this side other than in conflict with pedestrians. The other issue you've got around here is if you've got somebody with a pushchair, they're not going to be able to see what's going on around certain walls. So where we got to, and I'm just going to show you a plan there, if I can just. So if you can all see this plan, these were the issues that we looked at. So you can see we've done it as a full technical drawing. We've looked at, as I say, putting a refuse from here all the way down to here. But we just don't believe, because of each of these issues that I've tried to show there, we don't believe that's safe. What does this mean for us? Well, we looked, if I can just go back to this document, we looked at what the impact is on the residents that would move into this development. Using, I may just zoom in. Using this footpath, the mount, and to get to the shop takes 3 minutes. Using this development, Dragonfly Close and Feltham Lane, takes 4 minutes. Using this, crossing the B3092 and using Little Keyford Lane takes 5 minutes. So those are the magnitudes of change that we're talking about in terms of walkable distances, all measured at the same pace and the same approach. So we really feel that trying to make this better is actually trying to encourage people to use a solution which is more than suboptimal. So we've concluded we don't want to pursue that because we don't feel that's appropriate, and we should really still be encouraging people to use Little Keyford Lane. If we've got the Wayne Homes access away from Little Keyford Lane onto the Mount, we can start to really have a nice pedestrian route through there. And again, using Feltham Lane and using the residential streets, which are good streets, part of secure by design, part of vitality and of settlement. Is all about having pedestrians on streets. So we really like to encourage that. In terms of the roundabout, as I say, hopefully we've explained why we've chosen not to go down a roundabout route and actually create a gateway further south and create a whole gateway which is urban design related. I believe I've covered all of the items that were bus stops. Sorry, I haven't covered bus stops and sustainability. So bus stops, we are proposing bus stops on the 3092, but not into the sites. Again, I don't think we'll get a bus operator to run into the site. In terms of, I'm going to stop sharing now. So in terms of sustainability, and then I'm done. We looked at carbon impact, and we've taken on board the discussion about solar panels. So every house will be fitted with solar panels. I noticed some of the comments online saying that houses will only be made ready. No, and that's incorrect. They'll be fitted with solar panels. In terms of gas boilers, again, I heard the discussion earlier. No intention to repeat that. We have the same issues that Curo have. What I would say is that we are still in that transition period. It might be that whilst Keyford might be solar and gas boiler, Little Keyford, things might have moved on from there. I heard the discussion about ground source heat pumps. Ground source is very difficult to make work on a housing scheme of any scale. And the reason is because it freezes the ground. You either go for a borehole, which freezes the ground around the borehole, and you've got to repeatedly bore 25-metre deep boreholes every few years, or you lay it out on a sheet and there's just not enough room on a housing scheme for ground source. So that's why you don't go down that route. Air source is a little easier, but as I say, as Curo mentioned, it's a very expensive option, which is why we have gone fabric first and solar PV. I hope that answers as many of the questions as I had notes on, but if you've got more, please do raise them now. And thank you for the time.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks for that. Questions, please. Anybody? Everybody. Mark first. And then
Thank you. Just a very small point, Colin. Thank you for your presentation. It's all about access along the 3092. I think what you've realised, that we certainly realise here, is people follow desire lines. They're going to walk up the 3092, and it's our job, your job, to mitigate against that, because it's obviously going to be a bit busier and people will go where they want to go. That's what's happened in our town centre, and we've had to try and facilitate that, really. Something in your plan I'm intrigued by. It's a very small point. You say you want to make this a new entrance to the town, really, by significant, memorable and landmark buildings. What will a landmark or memorable building look like? I don't see you building anything public realm there. It's more especially nice houses or what? I don't know what a landmark or memorable building, how you perceive that.
Okay. I mean, landmark can be done in a number of ways. We were asked to keep the architecture simple, and that was a request of the Civic Society. And I don't think it will be right to have a Palladian type building as a landmark. That's one way of creating it through the detail of the architecture. But there's also about scale. The buildings on the front are of a greater scale. If you look at their depth and height, that's why. And when you group buildings together, again, you're creating that greater scale. So, and it's about then how you position your building. So when quite often what you see is you turn a corner and you see a gable end of a building. that to me is not creating a landmark. It's having a frontage of a building position. So may I just share the screen again a moment, and I'll just show you the positioning of one or two of the buildings. So here, if you look here, as you're coming in, rather than that building being in a direct line down here and all facing this way, at which point you see gable ends, it's about turning that around. So that's how you, and pushing that out quite close to the mount. So that's how you create the landmark. And then if you look again, if you look at the scale of these buildings or these buildings compared to this, in plan form, they're more substantial, but it is still about keeping a simplicity to it. We also do that through planting, and obviously we've not got the other side of this scheme on here, but through parkland through here. So it is a mixture of things. You know what it feels like when you drive into I'll stop sharing again. When you drive into a town or a village, how do you know you've arrived? You know you arrived because you've gone from countryside, and there's either that sort of first building, and that's what creates the first impression. So we have tried to do that without going over the top.
Okay, thanks for that, Colin. We've got Paul first, and then Rich.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Colin. I appreciate your in-depth explanations of looking at the mount, etc., and the things that you've done. I think, I mean, slightly as Mark said, I think people will kind of go their way they want to go, and as you rightly say, it's probably only a minute's difference, and many people may take a longer route, but there will always be some people that will want to take the short route inevitably. So I guess, as Mark said, we need to mitigate against that. We need to plan for that, and I think as some people have mentioned in comments, traffic calming on the B3092, the mount is critical to this. We need to slow that traffic down to make it safer, and you've got some what do you call it, the kind of the islands in the middle of the road, I think, in part of it. But I think as a society, as a culture, we're on a bit of a cusp in changing the way we think about transport and traffic, etc., etc. And we still got a long way to go. We still feel that the car is dominant. We have to keep away from the car. But I think that we need to make the pedestrian in charge here, in these situations. And so crossings of the B3092 need to be pedestrian priority. So cars have to stop. If there's a pedestrian wanting to stop, cars have to stop. We need to create that in the road furniture somehow to make that really obvious that the pedestrian has. And I think by doing that, effectively you're slowing the cars down because they have to stop pedestrians as they go in. So that makes it a bit safer for pedestrians that do want to walk along the mount, and for cyclists going along the mount. But it also means that it's potentially safer for the pedestrians who want to cross the mount to go through the other side to Little Heathford, etc. So I think that might be one way that we could help with this situation is some really serious traffic calming. And I think your kind of staggered junction scheme works to a point, but I think it probably could be improved from that point of view. It's still, well, the way I see it, it's still allowing the car to be dominant, but just making the pedestrian a bit safer in a car dominated world. And I think we need to switch that on its head. And I think that's, your layout of your site still reflects a car dominated world inevitably, like so many, as I've said many times. It's I know you said it's not suburban in terms of its density, but it's still suburban in terms of its layout. is very car dominated, and I think we need to be getting away from this, from all these developments, you know. And I appreciate that society isn't quite there yet, you know, and you're perhaps reflecting where we are as a society, but we really do need to change. This is a serious point, and we really need to change that. So yeah, so moving on from that, just a small connection detail. I noticed there's a really short space between the kind of northeast corner of your site and kind of the extension of Dragonfly Close. Kind of would make sense to me to have a pedestrian route through there, so that if you live in that, if you're resident in the northeast corner of your site and you want to go to Feltham Lane, you don't have to go kind of a long way round to get to Dragonfly Close. You can cut straight across. Do you see what I mean? In your, so yeah, that seems like an easy win really to me. So yeah, so and permeability, as I said, across the mount. You've got the same issue here as I mentioned with the previous application. The affordable is clustered again in the kind of least desirable part of the site, which is along the main road, and in the terraced housing. All the rest of the housing is semis or detached, apart from the affordable, which is terraced. I don't have anything against terraced housing, but it does seem again that the affordable is put in the least desirable housing types and the least desirable locations, which is a shame. You know, it's a shame that's clustered in that way. And the last thing really that I'd like to say is on architectural design and styling. Your material choice and your architectural style, I find personally quite objectionable, if I can be blunt. The previous application we looked at were thinking much more, if you like, in a contemporary way. Your architectural styling is still pastiche. The use of the frumiers, as we call it, is quite a pastiche detail. Some of the materials are quite pastiche. If we could use more modern materials, you know, and I don't have anything against the reconstituted stone, etc. But if you use it everywhere, it just begins to look cheap, because although you say is that, you know, the quality is much better, you can still tell it's reconstituted stone, it's not real stone, because there's a uniformity about it that you don't get with natural stone. So a bit of a mix maybe, like with the application that we discussed, where they were using buff colored bricks or grey bricks, render, and more contemporary styling really, and more details would be an improvement. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Would you like me to just comment on a couple of those? Or
yeah, please do, Colin. Yeah,
would that be okay?
Sure.
I think, I mean, it is interesting, and it is an interesting point about the access and the desire lines, and you know, we've taken that very seriously as an issue. I think that we got to the point with certainly that northern access point. Sorry, the mount. You either encourage people to use the mount in a suboptimal situation, or you actively discourage, and we've taken the actively discourage. I do take the point about slowing cars down, and you know, that's completely understood. I haven't shown you the full sort of traffic calming scheme because there are 3 parts to it. There's 2 which we would effectively provide, which is related to our schemes, and then there's a 3rd part as well. So the 3rd part would rely on Wayne Homes accessing off the mount and then coming up with, as I say, so that would be additional crossing points, additional traffic calming, the use of, you know, there is a benefit of using different coloured tarmac. It's such a simple thing to do, but it works really well. Yeah, traffic calming and slowing the car down has been predominant. I just wanted to comment on the, take the point on detail and design, and you know, one group of people will ask us to use through mirrors, one group won't ask us to use through mirrors, and you've kind of got to make a decision. But on the terracing and the clusters of affordable housing, registered providers will never take what is true pepper potting, i.e. one house here, one house there, because from a management point of view, they don't like it. It's very difficult to manage. So they tend to like small groups, which is what we've tried to do. Why are they in the locations they are? Terraced housing, if you notice, they're not small terraced houses, but what they are is they're also more efficient from a fuel perspective. So actually having terraced houses is quite a good thing from an affordable point of view, from a running of a house, which is why they are where they are. So there was no preconceived notion to design those into those locations as affordable housing. It was done on an architectural design basis first, and then work out which were the best houses to serve the registered providers. So that's how we approached it. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Rich, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Colin. You've covered a huge number of points, so thank you for that. It's very, very full and informative presentation. Couple of things are, there's a drainage report from I think it's an Mendip engineer that is not totally critical, but not totally supportive of your drainage plans across the site. I still go back to my original objection to the swales being outside of the permitted development boundary, but there's probably nothing I can do about that now. But I just wondered if you'd address that. And similarly, sewage treatment proposals, where is that still heading back to the existing sewage treatment works? And are we happy that there's enough capacity? One last little thing that I spotted, which was Southwest Partnership, Waste Partnership. They had several reservations about the layout of the bins and access for waste disposal vehicles. Have you been able to sort that out with them?
Right. So in terms of sewage, sewage is something that is the responsibility of the undertaker, the water company. So there's what happens is you might be all familiar with this, is a requisition process. So and it's their responsibility to provide that. They receive a receipt off of residents to do so. So they given this was a local plan site, and during that local plan process, they have known for many years that this scheme is coming forward. They should have, as part of, they have AMP programs, 5-year cycles. So these schemes should have already been in their 5-year cycle from a sewage perspective. We don't affect any more than that. We just requisition from them. In terms of surface water, there are minor changes. We haven't had a final consultation response on that, so I can't comment any more on that other than to say it's been designed in accordance with Sewers for Adoption 8, which is the 2021 guidance. So we're bang up to date. And it's trying to do two things, which is what Sewers for Adoption changed. It went from we just have to store water to we have to store water and be environmentally friendly about how we do it. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. The waste partnerships, I wasn't really aware that there was a particular issue with collections. I think some of that is addressed by, quite often it's about access from rear gardens. And I think if you remember what happened at committee, there was some references to how do you get your bin out of a rear garden? Well, there are walkways, there are back gates. But I can just confirm that and I'll respond.
Oh, sorry, yes, just a small point for me. I mean, usually that matter gets dealt with by condition in terms of bin muster points if they're not required, and there are usually standards that we have to adhere to in terms of the length, the distance that somebody would actually have to move a bin, so that it isn't onerous and it can be collected in a satisfactory way.
Okay. I don't normally notice those sort of things, but there was a report from SWP criticising it or asking for a condition or something. So I'm sure it's been dealt with. I just wondered if you could tell me what you've done, but I'm sure it will work itself out. Thank you.
What's quite sad, and again, it was Councillor Horton mentioned we designed for the car. Unfortunately, what we're actually having to design for is a bin lorry through most of the site, and they are big things, you know, and that dictates tracking around the site.
Thanks, Connie. Thanks, Rich. Lizzie, then me.
You can go first if you want, Steve. I don't mind.
No, after you. Your question's probably more intelligent than mine.
Oh, no, I doubt it. So a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned this at the very end on sustainability. You mentioned fabric first as your dominant approach, and I just wondered if you could give us a sense of comparison about your fabric standards and how they compare, for example, to current building regulations or future home standard, just so we can peg it as we have with the previous one. Because if that's the strategy, we need to have a sense of how that's measured. With regard to the footpath going sort of, not the public right of way one, the kind of pedestrian access up through Dragonfly Close and sort of the back route, if you like. When we talked about that before, the public right of way is kind of a muddy, boggy path, from my understanding, and not great if you're pushing a pram. Would that be a proper paved surface, well lit, etc., for use by people who need a smoother surface and who want some sort of sense of personal safety when walking through a back footpath of an evening? Also, on the 80 to 90 metre virtual one-way things, you've never driven up the butts in Frome, have you? You know, there's an awful lot of Frome which is de facto take it in turns and one way, simply because we have, you know, a historic street layout and usually parking rather than people on one side of the road. So culturally, actually, I think the town is probably quite used to taking it in turns and recognising narrowness of space. Equally, I can see that where you've got those houses that come right up to the road surface, you'd have to be a bit creative there. I did wonder about, there's this sort of contradiction going on about being the gateway into the town on the 3092 and these landmark buildings we talked about, and having that sense of moving from the country into the town almost sets the template that if you live there, you're facing the road. You know, these areas face that BO392, because the 392, because that's how you've come in. Almost they need to face the other way, because you're facing the other way, then you're facing the footpaths. And your mindset is different. Almost if the 3092 felt like the back way into these areas, your brain would go, oh, I'm going forward out of my house to the footpath to take me into town. I mean, I have great sympathy with the fact they're trying to squeeze people, cars and bats into very narrow spaces that aren't designed for all three of those things to coexist. And I'm not sure that the solution is quite there yet. I think Paul's right, that there's still that prioritisation of the car over the people. But I would have given up long ago. So I commend the continued effort to try and figure out a way to do it.
Okay. Should we try doing in reverse order? Because I think the footpath and the 80 to 90 metres bit and that whole issue, you know, I mean, we really have debated it an awful lot. The 80 to 90 metres, the moving in and out of parked cars. I mean, I live on a high street. You know, there's probably 70, 80 cars parked on our high street at any one time. You can only ever be on one side or the other side of the road. But what there is there's gaps within it that you're able to pull in, get a car in quickly. Now you might go 20 metres, sort of 5 or 6 cars pull in, you know, and it all works together and it's kind of ad hoc. Here, the problem is you've got a 90 metre no pull in distance. And I have to travel to a place called Wootton Under Edge, which has this problem where there's it's about 80 metres where there are no pull-ins, and what happens is you get people racing through the narrowness because they want to try and push through because they've been waiting for a little while. You know, they're 3-4 cars, and and it's the distance. The problem then is you can't, because of the way that side of the road is structured, with the driveways, with the parking on the inside, there's no way of creating a safe area for pedestrians, because you'd have to keep breaking the footpath to allow a car to pull in. And this is where you end up with a huge conflict going on. And as I say, we've tried every which way to sort that out. We even thought about putting it on the other side of the road, but there are equally conflicts with putting it on the other side of the road because of the landing areas and what happens at the other end. So there really has been a full debate on that, and you can't, I think the only way to make that work is by securing a different ownership to the lane that cuts across. Then you wouldn't have to have that one-way system. You'd only have to have two short landing areas. But the problem is we don't have ownership of that, and we can't go out and compulsory purchase it. You as a town council, or Mendip, have compulsory purchase powers, but whether they use it or not, I don't know. So
can I cheekily ask if you've offered to purchase it or to rent it, any of those patches of privately held, like the little bits of off-street parking and those?
You couldn't rent it. It would have to be adoptable highway, and that's where the issue arises.
Okay.
So you're taking it away. And the problem is, if you're taking little bits away, it still doesn't matter. You'd have to take the entire stretch, and you'd have to have those three houses that are pulling out. You'd have to take their driveways away. There is no other way to stop the conflict of a car coming across, and it's particularly, may I just share the screen a moment? We'd have loved to have done something. We really would, because it solves a problem, and we recognise there is an existing issue here. It's here. If you're can you see the screen okay there?
Yes.
That's come up hopefully okay. So this driveway here and this wall here, you'd have to have your refuse here, and there is no way. Sorry, it's going to go too far. You'd have to take all of that out. You can see somebody's double the height of that wall. If you look further back, it's low. So you'd have to take all of that out. So you could then put refuse in there. So, and it becomes very, very complicated. And it's because you're dealing with multiple ownerships, multiple accesses. So it's not, we even looked whether you could just live with some of these, but it becomes, it just becomes dangerous. And if you're talking about two minutes, let's encourage people to do something else. There's a style there. We shouldn't be encouraging people with push chairs to walk up there. We should be encouraging them to use the other routes and making them attractive. So if I can just share, there was another point you made about the link to Dragonfly Close. I may just share my screen again. Sorry, I'm darting about a bit. Here we go. So this footpath up here is a proper footpath, a metal footpath. What we're trying not to do, I believe, is not light this one. There will be lighting in here. So, and perhaps not all footpaths need to be lit all of the time. What we will do though through here is, this is a cycle footpath, so there is a connection, and a good connection through, and it's a good metal connection. What we haven't explored, which has been raised this evening, I think is what's talked about, is some kind of a connection through here. I think the only question I have about that, and whether it would work or not, is ownerships on this side, because I suspect these are privately owned drives, and punching through vegetation. But we can have a look at that and see whether there's anything feasible or not. But yeah, I mean, that route, would be a lovely pedestrian route, and then a cycle route up through, and then out.
So just to clarify, that cycle route that you marked out.
Yes.
And then down to the.
So this is a
what
cycle
you call the
route.
footpath, which is not the road, but the.
If I zoom in a
The
little
very
bit.
straight bit. The bit you said would not be lit.
So this is cycle path through here, and then this is footpath through here.
Okay.
And then there's footpath connections across here.
Okay.
I just wanted to pick up on, I think you mentioned, sorry, I'm losing my way a bit here. Somebody may, I think it was facing, it was the facing or not facing.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll do the building regs as well. So then facing or not facing, there is a footpath running all the way through here, which again connects into the Dragonfly Close. So there's a natural, we hope there's a natural desire line here. You get to here, you naturally pick up the Dragonfly Close access. We felt it was important to face, because I think, you know, if you go to any settlement now, and you look at a 1980s settlement, the traditional way was to back onto the road. And then you get these sort of faceless entrances to towns. I mean, Yate in South is a classic example of the Radburn layout, which has benefits for pedestrians, but it is terrible in terms of secure by design and its aesthetic, and, you know, encouraging to people to use the whole area. So we are trying to create perimeter blocks here, where your private space is on the inside of the perimeter block and your public space is on the outside, and that's why we'd faced out.
Can you just scroll up just so I can follow that line of that path?
Yeah, so it runs all the way up here, all the way up behind
there,
and then collects into, and that's Dragonfly Close.
Okay.
Running through there. So you've got these.
Oh, that desire line is really strong, though, isn't it?
It is, and do you know what? This one here, it is. It is absolutely. You know, I'm not going to say it to you otherwise. It is. You know.
Sorry, I'll stop now.
There will be people that will try and use that, absolutely. But should we be encouraging to use it by making it that little bit better so more people use it, or should we be keeping it to a minimum? And I think we kept coming back to, we really should be discouraging it. There are styles at the other end. We, you know, the more you do to that, the more people use it. So there's balances both ways. We can't affect a solution which is appropriate. It's because the daft thing is, it wouldn't even be a particularly costly solution. You know, if you could do it in the highway, it'd be great, but there's too much conflict. We've had two highway engineers look at it, two separate highway engineers. Building regs, sorry, last question. I can't tell you where we're at in terms of the new building regs. I can tell you that we will exceed, I believe the whole site is being now designed to the new building regs. How far they're exceeded, I don't have an answer to that. I can find out, but certainly with the PVs and the additionality there, we will be exceeding it. From a fabric first point of view, it will be meeting the requirements of the new building regs.
Okay, I wouldn't call that a fabric first approach. I call that compliance first approach, but we'll save that for a rainy day.
The development, some of the development could be put under the existing ones, and yeah. Okay.
According to the design and access statement, Corinne, it misses by quite a...
Oh, I think I've lost you. Oh, is everyone still there?
Yeah, I think we just lost Steve.
Froze. Sorry, that was me freezing. I'll turn my video off. I don't know if what you got. According to your design and access statement, it misses by a considerable margin.
It does in the design and access
building.
The design and access statement is the original one. It's the design compliance statement and the new energy statement. So those are the two documents that set it out.
Okay.
What we felt was not right was to redo the whole of the design and access statement. I can clarify that if you'd like, though, separate to this.
Yeah, I was looking at your full resource energy efficiency statement. I don't know if that's updated or not.
They were both updated, yes.
Yeah, well, according to that, it sort of just about makes 2013 Part L, misses 2021 Part L by a considerable margin, and goes on and on and on. So, you know, 2013 is a long way ago. World's moved on since then, as far as I'm concerned.
I'll confirm that to you.
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, yes, that's unexpected. We'll look at that. I mean, we
don't
did have
believe it does that. The energy state. I was trying to just find the energy statement now. But anyway, if we keep going, I'll find it.
Sure.
In time.
Okay. No. Yeah. Time is marching on. If you could confirm that to us, that's quite important. You know, I don't want to drag on about it tonight. That's all I had, really. The other questions have been answered. So Jane, and then Rich again.
Oh, I don't know if Rich wants to carry on first. I was going to
just a quick reminder, the footpath at the north there. I know school kids use that as well, don't they? Because the school's up there. I can't remember if you can access the school from that path. I think you can from memory. So it's going to get used, whether you like it or not, I guess.
Yeah, and if it's from a school access point of view, I mean, that's very different to crossing the B3092, because they're not obviously going up that far.
Jane, have you got your?
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry, I was going to read out the comments from Elaine and Mike Pugsley and Duncan. So if I start with Duncan's comments, Duncan's scheme. First, it has to be acknowledged that DWH have made some welcome shift towards the sort of development that FTC, Folk and the Civic Society envisaged in our joint discussions held following the MDC decision to defer permission for this application in July 2021. However, inevitably, the modifications in these revised proposals fall far short of expectation, though we are not so unrealistic as to suppose we'd get everything we asked for. The B3092 remains a sticking point, with no sign of the pedestrian safety measures such as chicanes and refuges that were promised. It says by folk, but I'm thinking means to folk. The quantum of available green space taken up by drainage ponds, effectively dead space, is regrettable and could surely be reorganised better so as to have one or two larger ponds for the whole of the FR3A rather than four. The location of the largest block of green space adjacent to the busy B3092 similarly reduces its potential as a quiet refuge or for play activities. Folk has argued for a wide band of green space along the Little Keyford Lane boundary, which could permit small allotments as well as play space. In this sensitive hillside site, to see the developer persisting in its plan to build some homes with roof heights above 2 stories is regrettable. And despite Folk and FTC's clearly expressed hope that it might constitute a model exemplar development, there is no plan for passive house standards of construction, no plan to avoid delivering gas to the site, no plan to install heat pumps, roof panels or electric vehicle charging points as standard. These features should not be optimal at a time of climate crisis. The spirit of Glasgow should underpin this development. So that's Duncan's comments. I don't know whether Colin, you wanted to make any comment there before I move on to Elaine and Mike's comments.
If I could be very brief, because I know it's late. There was mention of the of Little Keyford Lane. We have increased, bear in mind that's still an outline application, but our whole design for that area is an increased green refuge. We've also included, we haven't included allotments, but we have included small orchard planting in some of the areas. We've moved play space around on the Little Keyford site. We're not passive house and we don't have heat pumps, but obviously we do have PVs, which perhaps haven't been picked up. And there are, I believe, albeit it's probably, I don't know what kilowattage it is, there are electric charging points within garages, I think, and Cecilia might be able to just confirm that.
Yes, there's provision made for them in the travel plan.
Yeah. So some of those things are actually in there. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I'll move on to the next comments. It's quite a lot of comments, so bear with me. Just I'll praise the first comment. It's just about the problems with people accessing Mendic's planning portal and not necessarily being able to understand and interpret the plans and the implications of development, and that a site meeting with the developers had been requested, but that's not happened. We feel that residents may be excluded from a realistic democratic process that directly affects their homes and lives. Positive proposals and suggestions. So number one, the retention and green improvement of the public footpath through Dragonfly Close towards Birchall Lane, a valuable amenity for the wellbeing of Frome residents in the Keyford area, and two, traffic calming on the B3192, that should be the 092. This is an immediate need and should not wait until the whole development is completed. Number three, consideration to protected species. I'm not sure my previous supply of empirical information has been recorded, that we observed bats circling in front of our house, number 62, on summer evenings, where DWH placed a bat box in the tree in the adjacent hedgerow, which seems to be inhabited. Any construction needs to protect this habitat. Number four, consideration given to build specifications relating to adverse weather conditions. How will this be supervised? How can we be sure the developers have sufficient access to skilled construction staff during a UK skill shortage? Number five, inclusion of solar panels. These should be integrated in roof construction. Geothermal or air source heat should be integrated to avoid the need for gas installations. Concerns and objections. We are unclear of the relationship of the elevations of the nearest house to ours on the DWH development. We can see that a reasonable distance between our properties is planned, but cannot tell if the proposed Avondale will affect the light into our property, which is already sensitive to shade. The site meeting with the plans could resolve this uncertainty. Timescale and construction plan. Will adjacent houses to Dragonfly Close be built first? If not, we will have years of dust and construction noise and require compensation to cope with this inconvenience and reduction in property values. Pedestrian route plan is insensitive to residents' actual walking patterns. The proposed route to Little Keyford Lane is fine for a country walk. Shopping on the Marston Trading Estate involves bulky items and usually requires a car. Residents walk into town or to the co-op. The proposed footpaths do not help these objectives. Urgent improvements need to be made alongside traffic calming to address the lack of safe space for pedestrians as they emerge from the main footpath bordering the school opposite Ashton House. Attenuation ponds can be helpful for wildlife but dangerous for pedestrians. They are usually fenced off with danger signs, becoming hostile for residents. This is probably indicating that the entire site is unsuitable unless better land drainage can be installed. The regular flooding and ponding on Birchall Lane, Binney Lane and Sandy Hill Lane is strong evidence of a major land drainage problem in the whole development area. That's it.
Would you like me to briefly respond if this is recorded and going out, so at least people can hear? We actually, a lot of those things we have considered, so I will try and be quick. Access on the portal. everything is on there. We submitted the entire application again as a whole, so there wasn't hopefully any confusion. You didn't have to read through different types of plans and work out what was a resubmission and what wasn't. So hopefully we've been helpful. I did go on tonight, it's all on there. I know they were slow. We circulated it to everybody much faster than the authority did, which might have been why there was perceived to be a delay, but they've done their proper consultation, as they should do. The site visit requested, I must admit I've not seen a request for that, so that might be for others to look at. We can certainly look into that. I haven't received any emails. Retention of Dragonfly Close footpath. Is that the one? I'm not entirely so sure which footpath that is. Is that the one to the north we've been talking about, the one by the back of the school? Well, I think hopefully we've talked about that. Traffic calming on the B3092, it comes in 3 phases, so it's not left to the end. And the 3 phases relate to each of the 3 developments. Subject obviously to the Wayne scheme accessing onto the Mount as opposed to Little Keyford Lane. So no, it's not left to the end. The accesses are formed and then the traffic calming's formed along those lines, and that certainly, you know, would be dealt with via planning condition and technical approval from the Highway Authority. And there is a whole series of traffic calming measures running all the way up. I haven't done that in detail today. Protected species, yeah, we know there are bats in the area. We've surveyed them. There's been months and months of bat survey work having been done to get to where we are, so we know we're protecting them in the right way. And that will be monitored, no doubt, through condition. Build specs and adverse weather. I can't speak for the houses other than they're designed to building regulations. Certainly from a drainage point of view, I think it's important to know, and in relation to the danger of ponds, these are not permanently wet ponds. They are dry basins for the large majority of their time. They only become wet when obviously there's a potentially heavy rainstorm. The grade, it's less. You should never fence off ponds, because what's the natural thing for slightly older kids to do is to climb over the fence and have a look at what's going on. It actually encourages the opposite of what you think, and there's a whole load of work done by ROSPA, the protection agency, to that. The ponds though are shallow gradient, so you can walk in and walk out, and that's how you make them safe when there's water in them. But they should be play areas when there's not water in. You know, if they are large areas of natural grassland. So there shouldn't be any danger of them being unsafe, and they're very commonly used that way. Solar panel integration, we've dealt with that previously. We've talked about the gas position. The Dragonfly close end first, I don't know the answer to that. I suspect there are a small number of properties around Dragonfly close that might be constructed earlier. I can try and find out the direction, but of course, naturally, you start where your site entrance is. This isn't going to be years and years worth of development. I think, Cecilia, correct me if I'm wrong, less than 2 years, given the number of dwellings on the Keyford side.
Yes, I'd probably expect it to be about 2 years. Yeah,
so that's the construction time. We've talked about traffic calming, talked about ponds. Pedestrian routes not the same as walking patterns. I mean, all I can say is we can work with what we've got. You know, there is nothing fundamentally wrong. I've mentioned earlier the times that we've measured walking from our site to the co-op and compared all the routes. So I think it's a very quick response, but hopefully that covers alongside everything else we've said.
Jane, is that okay? Over to you.
Over to me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got anything else? You got your hands up. That's all.
Oh, sorry. No, it's quite similar to the colour of my curtains, and I couldn't see.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah, over to you.
you're looking for a summary?
Well, no, I think there's a few points that we need a few answers or bits of clarification on. I hope you've got what they are. I've got a couple of notes. Got in, as I say, I think, as I said at the very start of the meeting, which seems an awful long time ago. This isn't. Unfortunately, it's informal. We won't be voting. We can't vote. I think, subject to everyone else, the best thing is if we can sort of drop you a note and get a couple of bits of clarification that we've spoken about tonight, and then we can use that together with what we heard today to formulate our response. I think that's if that makes sense to everybody. If anyone's got a question, shake your head or whatever. I would like to thank you and Celia for your time tonight and over the past sort of months, years, I think even, for the time you spent, and you know the questions that we throw at you and you've answered. Thank you very much for that. You know, it is very, very useful from our perspective to understand a lot of these things, and it helps immensely in shaping these sort of developments. So even though we may agree to disagree on some things, thank you very much for your time and your patience and your answers. And I'm sure we'll get in contact with you over the next couple of days, and we can clarify some of the bits that are outstanding.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I got three things down: the building reg side, build programme, and I think just a bit of clarity on the access side. But yeah, if there's more, please let us know. But we'll get on, certainly try and provide that as quickly as we can do.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh,
apologies for my absence at the beginning.
Hang on. I'm Jay.
Sorry, all I wanted to say was we had an agreed extension with Mendic in respect of submitting our comments to enable us to submit them tomorrow. But just what I'll do is I'll drop a line to the case officer just to let them know that we are expecting some further information. So I may not be able to meet tomorrow's deadline by the time I've circulated that to everybody, and you know, we've had an opportunity to look at that. So that was all. That was it. No more.
Thank you. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Celia.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Steve, sorry, just one thing. Given that the local residents would be really keen for a site meeting, could one of the additional things for Colin's list be to just to follow up with that, just to find an opportunity, to make an opportunity to go and meet with residents in Dragonfly Close and just talk through some of their detailed concerns as well?
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Lizzie. Yeah, let's see if we can make that happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Right.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, Colin. Thanks, Celia. Jane, is there anything else we need to?
Well, we did say at yesterday's meeting that we would have a quick chat about Greenhill Grange once everybody had a chance to go and have a further look at the plans, because we kind of ran out of time yesterday as well. So that was all.
Right. Okay. I had a look at the plans. I had a look around today. I think one of my reservations last night was that they were just sort of getting rid of the garden to add extra bedrooms. It doesn't appear they are adding extra bedrooms. It seems to be that it's really making the rooms en suite. On that basis, I must admit, I don't have too much of an issue with it. Personally, that's my view. Anyone else got any comments?
But just to say, I think Sheila was saying yesterday that, you know, she thought it had you know, a lovely garden area at the back, and I've had a look, and actually it does. We've seen an application for tree works there previously, and the space at the back, and so yes, that there will still be a lot of available usable garden or amenity area for residents.
Great. Paul.
I'm not going to argue with any of that, but just my comment really yesterday was that currently there appears to be on the plan a small green strip as a kind of buffer between residents' bedrooms and the car park.
Yeah.
And these proposals removes that green strip, so the bedrooms abut directly on the car park, which seems detrimental to me.
Yeah.
If I was in a care home, I'd rather look at, you know, even if it's just a little bit of grass. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could add in a comment that it would be nice if there was a strip of green retained at the front between the car parking for the residents.
Is there anything else? One of those rhetorical questions. Great. Thank you, everybody. Been a bit of a marathon this week. Yeah, I think we all deserve a drink, round of applause, whatever suits. Yeah, got through an awful lot, and I think it's not going to stop, is it, Jane, from looking at next month's meeting anyway. But thanks, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in person